Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm kind of excited, and I'm actually very, very honored to be here. All right, so as we go through this, we're going to talk about, hey, how can this affect things like all of these areas? Communication, sales, teams, work groups. Do you guys have those? All right, so today, this little exercise we're going to go through, we're going to do a thing where you learn and understand your own behavioral style. Now, the other thing is to recognize the style of others and ultimately adapt your style to the other person. That's a gift in itself, right? When you adapt, that's a generous gift. And I think of gifts and generosity very similar. When you match or mirror, has anybody heard of mirroring before? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a little bit like mirroring. When you mirror somebody else, there's a degree of appreciation that comes back and there's an understanding that they're like, okay, this person gets me. This person understands kind of who I am and what's important and what's valuable. These are the behavioral styles of DISC. And the observable, and they're actually observable, right? So the D stands for dominance, but it also refers to a director. About 19% of the population has this primary style of communication. And that's what we're really talking about here, right? An influencer, somebody that uses verbal persuasion as their primary method of communication, about 32%. Steady relator, 35%, and a compliant analyzer is about 14%. All right. Two styles. We have the natural style. That's if left on your own, you could do it any way you want to do it. That's your preference. That's inherently comfortable, right? Then we have the adapted style, and the adapted style is kind of what you're doing at work, right? How do you view your present environment? Because you don't get to do everything the way you want to do it at work, right? There's some rules, there's some procedures you got to follow up. When you're building a relationship with somebody, where do you think you want to connect with them? So their inherent comfortable space is where you want to connect with. That's where their preference is. Now again, so for example, you might have somebody that's a leader in the organization and he's exhibiting a lot of dominant or director type behavior, goal-oriented, goal-centered, et cetera, because that's what the job calls for him to do. But that may not be the person he is at home. Right? You want to build a relationship, connect to the inside person, the inner person. This is the D style. Some behavioral characteristics associated with the D style. Key characteristics: direct, bottom line oriented, blunt, decisive, strong ego. Now you might see that in a leader, in a CEO, right? Because that's what work requires for him. So identifiers: fast-paced, they lean in, they're risk takers, they're confident, a lot of direct eye contact. And when you're talking with a D, right, or a high D, primary D style communicator, be direct and brief, stick to business. High points are really important. Make sure they win, because winning's really important to the high D. They're very goal-centric. And then identify any opportunities and challenges that you can help them with. And we don't touch them, we don't encroach on their space, we're not emotional, these aren't those guys, right? In fact, if you did that way with this guy, wouldn't it be awkward? Mm-hmm. Don't dominate the conversation. These guys want to do the talking. All right, so the I style. All right, key characteristics. And again, you can't do an adaptation until you understand what you're adapting to, right? Enthusiastic, emotional, friendly, spontaneous, trusting, open-minded. This disorganized, lots of piles. A lot of times you can see it in their desk, in their office, right? They're very smiley, very expressive, trendy, stand with hands in their pockets, touchy, right? So these guys don't have a problem with the touching thing, right? Do's and don'ts. You got to be willing to chat. You got to have lots of smiles. You do have to let them talk. Focus on the positive, make things fun. Make things fun. These guys, these are not detail guys. These are natural optimists, but they are not detail guys. So if you drag them down into the details, you're going to lose them, right? Don't be negative because they're optimistic. Don't discourage their enthusiasm because they're optimistic. Don't dominate the conversation because they want to play a role. So you can see if you go the wrong direction, that conversation is not going to go very fast, very far. It's not going to go very far, very fast. Okay, so the S, right? Now here we got the good listener, relaxed, team player, very approachable, very steady, right? And you guys are all probably saying, yeah, I know people like that, right? You probably know people like the other two styles that we talked about as well, right? In their office, a lot of times you'll see family in pictures. Their key emotional requirement is security. Typically, that's what they're driving, security for themselves, for their family, for their job, right? But they're also very poker-faced. You don't see a lot of emotion outside, whereas the D's and the I's will give you a lot more expressive activity and give you more clues. So this is one of the harder styles to see from a body language standpoint because they don't show it. They're like the poker players out there. So with these guys here, you just got to make sure that you don't fail to deliver on promises. Don't put pressure on them. They don't like that. Don't be restless. Don't make sudden changes. In fact, these guys aren't really big on change because change has risk. It affects security. There's some steps that go along with that. All right, behavioral style C. These are the analysts, right? These are the perfectionists, the fact finders, high standards, analytical, systematic, right? Identifiers, they're pretty reserved. They have a very functional office. Sometimes there's some charts and some graphs. They follow the rules. They're not big with hand gestures, not too touchy-feely. And here we want to give them lots of information because they want lots of information. Of the styles that we've talked about, these are the data consumers. They are natural skeptics, and so they use data to help them make their decisions. Right? They need time to think and decide. They focus on quality. Accuracy is the number one word for this style of person. Right? They want accuracy. And then you have to be patient. Don't touch. Don't discuss personal issues. They're not interested in socializing. Right? And again, everybody's on a different spectrum. Right? You find somebody, when you do a DISC assessment, it's a scale of 0 to 100. Right? And so, there's a difference between a 70-point C and a 95-point C, right? There's a degree of intensity that changes there. All right, so here's a little exercise. Everybody got a pencil, piece of paper, whatever? You're gonna wanna write this down. You really just you're drawing a cross there, right? And on the left side, you'll put the word reserved, and on the right side, you'll put the word outgoing. So the first thing we do when we meet somebody, because this is the thing, we want to identify what their style is. We can't adapt to their style until we understand what their style is. And we want to understand what their style is at home, right? Where it's inherent and it's comfortable. When you sit down and have a conversation with somebody, even whether it's at work or you're meeting somebody new, there's a couple of minutes at the beginning where you get to ask some personal type questions. Anybody ever ask anybody like, how's your weekend? Well, you know what they're going to do? They're going to say, well, I did X and I did Y and I hung out with a lot of people. And you might find out from that response whether they're more reserved or more outgoing, right? That's just very simple, right? All right, so in this particular case, we're going to say this person is reserved, okay? And you can put a little star right there. All right, so then at the top of your cross, right, you have the word task. And at the bottom of your cross, you have the word people. And so we find out if this person is really task-oriented or are they people-centric. Okay, so now, right, we've got our two stars. Draw a line. The top right box, put a D. The bottom right box, put an I. Bottom left box, put an S. Top left box, put a C. When you cross the chart, when you cross the stars, you've identified the primary style. All right, is this going to be perfect? No. This gives you a little ground to move towards, to test. And as opposed to being blind and not knowing at all, you can move in this direction. All right, so with that, take I can't see what my next slide is. Take a minute and draw the chart, and what's your style? Right? Answer the questions for yourself. What is your style? Now, imagine how important this is in the sales world or the enrollment world. We want somebody to buy into our idea or our system or our concept, right? So a lot of times we put together, one of the tools we use, we put together a sales agenda for the salesperson. And in the top right side of that agenda is that little cross with the D, the I, the S, and the C. One of the first things they're going to do is they're developing a relationship, building rapport with this new person that they're talking to, or even if it's a person that they've known for a long time, they're going to complete this little chart so that they can then begin to shift and adapt their behavior effectively. And again, it follows that whole theme of generosity. When you are actively engaged and listening and working to mirror or shift or communicate to the other person in their style, that's like you're giving a gift to them. All right, we're talking about communication strategies, right? Are there any particular goals, things that you would like to make sure that you have issues, challenges, things you'd like to address? Okay, if something pops up, let me know. That's what this little thing is for. Thanks, guys.